Chris making his chat debut.
Yeah.
Our producer on Foxborough Rush. Also, our guy, Athan Hristodulu.
Yes.
Got it?
Yes.
He got it.
Athan is a big WWE fan of wrestling overall. Look, we all grew up watching it. You know, I've fallen off. You know, I got to get back on my game. But monumental night in WWE, debuting on Netflix Monday night. It was in SoFi Stadium, right?
It was not in SoFi Stadium. It was in LA where I think the Clippers play.
Oh, in the Clippers new arena. I saw the Halo watching it. I saw the Halo watching it. Thank you for correcting me there.
Yeah.
Look, it looks sick. Like the Rocks walk out with the pop. Obviously, the Bloodline match with Roman Reigns. We see Cody Rhodes.
Look at you.
I'm not gonna list it all off.
Look at you.
I'm always a fan of Hulk Hogan getting booed. Athan, but you're the guy. You're the one that watches it all. What did you think of it, man? Netflix, hey, no buffering. They pulled through. And I was awesome to see for WWE just how big it was.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the way I looked at the show, and Triple H did a post-game press conference about this too. They always do media scrums after big events like this now. And he even talked about how the whole thing kind of took a life of its own. And it definitely did. There were expectations of premium live event. This is, not just a regular Monday night show. And I definitely think they delivered that. The match card was great. The in-between segments or promos, for those of you that might not be wrestling fans watching this, as they call it, were also really good. So this was a show that you wanted no buffering.
Right? It's simple.
And on top of that, you wanted good quality content that felt like bigger than a Monday night, and I definitely think they delivered.
Well, I want to ask this because George made fun of it, but I want to get into it because Hulk Hogan, not only did he get booed, but it was a struggle bus. The whole thing was a struggle. The fans gave him the business, but also the Hulkster, brother, you have not aged well. Like, he can't even do this anymore that good. He's pushing some crappy beer, I guess, that he's all about. Then when he ripped the shirt off and he had the Netflix shirt under the Hulkamaniac joint, he was barely ripping it. He was struggling. What's up with the Hulkster, man? I mean, Abe, you got to understand, my entire childhood, I was a Hulkamaniac. I ate the vitamins. I said the prayers. I mean, I did it all. I didn't do the steroids. He wasn't telling you that behind the scenes.
You didn't party in the 80s either.
I didn't party in the 80s.
Yeah.
I didn't do the things he was actually doing.
Yeah, that with the juice.
I believed the things he was preaching that we later found out were lies, Athan. And then we learned he's a piece of shack. But in the end, I mean, talk to me about the segment where they booed him and the Hulkster not aging well. Athan.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly one of those things that as a fan, you think WWE's pretty good at reading the room on a lot of things. And it's nice to see, even with them moving on from like the Vince McMahon era and all of that stuff that they've dealt with, that there is still like a segment of that company that still struggles with reading the room, and even with Vince McMahon gone, who could not read the room for the last 10 years he was there. But I don't know. I mean, you look at the whole situation, the entire setup, where they were as well, knowing your audience. They kind of got what they asked for. And I was actually talking about this earlier. I really feel like that was a segment that should have been for Stone Cold. And maybe there's some lingering issues with him because he hasn't shown up for a couple of big things now, being WrestleMania last year and then the very first Raw, which has been hyped up to the level of basically a WrestleMania at this point. So you get what you get with that. But wrestling fans as a whole have been out on Hulk Hogan for a while now. And talking even before this with some of the other producers, I haven't seen Hulk Hogan do something for wrestling, especially WWE related, in a long time. So I don't know what the thought process was behind it. I'm not surprised that was the end result. And I mean, that's the one black mark on what was a fantastic night overall.
Hey, look, I think, and it is supposed to be the highlight, when The Rock walked out, the pop of that crowd,
man.
And for however long that went, you're hanging on the edge of your seat, every slow move, with the belt on his shoulder. Just he obviously knows how to hold the entire arena in the palm of his hand. Is how The Rock became The Rock.
Yeah.
But that Roman Reigns match, man. I mean, it had everything. Cody Rhodes doing what he was doing in 2 of the 3 pieces of a suit and dress shoes, man. I think that, to me, was a peak of the night. What about you, Athan?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because that match for me was, and there's a lot of stock that was going into CM Punk and Seth Rollins main eventing the show. And believe me, love that match. And there was a real big mixed response between Rollins and Punk fans on Punk winning that match. I'm a big Punk fan, so I was happy to see him win. But for me, the highlight and most consequential, I guess you should say, match as far as the 4 that we got for that night goes, it was that one because that's a matchup that had so many storyline implications built into it this Roman Reigns bloodline thing for you two, because I know you're not as ingrained in the wrestling world as we are, but it's been something that's been going on since the COVID era when Roman Reigns came back during, I believe it was SummerSlam, if I'm remembering correctly. Someone can yell at me in the comments if I'm wrong, but this is something that has been going on for about 5 years now at this point. And for it to lead to this culmination on just a Monday night show where you have someone who basically took leadership of the family away from Roman Reigns in a pretty nasty way after his loss at WrestleMania last year, and it kind of blowing off at this Monday Night Raw is a little bit surprising to me, because you had The Rock, who a lot of people thought maybe this is setting up for the turn on him, didn't do that. He ultimately puts the Ulufala on Roman Reigns after the match. And on top of that, everyone's just waiting for the Rock versus Reigns setup, and we didn't get that. So now we're left with a giant question of, okay, they did not go any which way anyone thought. Where do these guys go next?
Hey, big picture, macro view of this stuff. I see a lot of discourse about real diehard wrestling fans like yourself. Although I feel like, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I feel like you could kind of see where I'm going here. A lot of people were upset that they used words like heel openly, and there was, sort of breaking that fourth wall, which is a wrestling no-no. And Triple H, to his credit, said, hey, this is what we're doing here, okay? We want the casuals. I think that's great. In fact, when you talk to George and I, this is why I say you're a diehard wrestling fan. George and I have respect for the game. George told you, hey, I fell off watching it, but I grew up with it. I fell off after the Attitude Era. I thought, to be honest, this would make me sound like an old head, I thought that was peak wrestling and there was nowhere else to go but down. And so I tapped out, even though I still know who's champion and I follow it to that extent. So I don't think George or I are casuals per se, but I think it's good that Triple H is leaning into this. Do you?
Absolutely. And in 2025, you don't really have much of a choice to do that anyways. And there are, for a long time, even myself, I kind of struggled with it, because I do think of myself as kind of an old school wrestling fan in the sense of I loved the kayfabe and stuff like that. Undertaker being my favorite wrestler growing up.
Same.
I love that he lived the
Undertaker
persona.
was the best,
You
man.
were both
the
Taker
persona.
guys.
Loved Undertaker.
I up until I got old enough to know what was actually going on. I'm literally sitting here like, this is a dead guy. What is he doing coming out of nowhere? As a kid. So
tough watching him now. He can barely move. I'm like, bro.
He's like Hogan. He's aged like Hogan.
Barely walking, but he's a
unfortunately,
beast.
for somebody who, if he has a podcast and I listen to it a lot because I love hearing the stories he tells. When you hear about the stuff he was doing, the partying and after stuff and all the surgeries he had, I'm sure this business takes a toll on people. But
sure.
As for leaning into the stuff, that opening, I've got to say, has made me in that moment feel more emotional about wrestling than I have in a really long time, because that cold open was something that I didn't get to watch prior to the show. So that was my first time getting exposed to it. I know they showed it prior to the show, but going into it, I didn't expect that. I just had seen something got posted. I didn't know it was going to be that. And I'm driving home as this is happening, and I'm sitting here and I can feel it in my soul as a wrestling fan, because wrestling, the entire sport entertainment of it, has so many things in the real world that I think a lot of people don't realize, but it has had such a large influence on pop culture from day one, when, you go back to the carnival days of wrestling when it wasn't organized the way it was and it was a giant circuit thing, to Vince McMahon turning it into what it is today, and now going into this new era on Netflix and whatnot with Triple H at the helm. It's had so much to do with pop culture and people don't realize it. So I love it. And the heel and face thing, in this day and age, we all know.
Right.
Even me, old school fan, do I wish that maybe it was a little less apparent? Sure, but I get it and I understand why. And it's almost like insulting people's intelligence to try and act like this isn't what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they're embracing it at this point.
At least own up to it. Just come out and say, this is, and Triple H
it's
said
entertainment.
It is huge to be on Netflix.
Yes.
This is monumental for wrestling. And look, everything Netflix is putting out it was with the Jake Paul stuff. It's been with the Tom Brady roast. Netflix is making the push of showing they can handle live events. Netflix, we're talking about wrestling. Netflix is making the push for a Super Bowl, possibly a World Cup down the road. All of it. Them, Apple, they're all going to be bidding for it. It's cool for WWE to embrace it. I think it's awesome for them to own it.
Yeah.
And look, end of the day, if you were entertained, what more do you want?
That's right.
And I think that's really important with a sport like that. you want to talk about it. You want to come in the office and talk about it like it's a football.
And they're real
Sunday.
athletes. They're real athletes. I don't care.
God,
the people that say, "Oh, well, it's fake." Well, so are you. Okay, sit on your couch and eat your bonbons.
Really quick. I don't think I've ever told you guys this. Did I tell you that I actually went to the New England Pro Wrestling Academy for a few months?
Come on.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So right out of high school, I did go into doing that. And the moment I decided I didn't want to do it anymore, I took a weird bump. My neck was stiff and hurt for about a month. And I was like, okay, I enjoy watching it. I like having my body intact. I get it. But it gave me a big appreciation. But the one thing that stood out for me from that, because people have always said, oh, it's fake, blah, 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 blah. And that's so insulting to what they do. But the very first bump that I took on the mat, when I hit the ground, it felt like my heart nearly blew out of my chest. And I was like, wow, this is not, even as something as simple as hitting the ropes. I mean, they're metal wires that are electrical taped, basically. So, I mean, it's not fake. It's very, very physically real.
We need pics or video or it didn't happen, George.
Hey, you get back in the ring, I'll be your manager. The promo guy will be the Mediterranean monsters, you and I. Greeks and Armenians, bro. Yes, brother. Athan, love having you on chat, man.
Appreciate
Awesome talking wrestling. A little trip down memory lane. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to Boston's End of the